Hi, I'm Katrina Blowers from 7 News, and you've joined us for more parenting tips in these days of immense change. And joining us in person this time is our resident parenting expert and the director of the Parenting and Family Support Centre at the University of Queensland, Professor Matt Sanders.
Hi, Katrina.
So lovely to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Now, the easing of restrictions, which is why we're able to be together, albeit physically distant, is very welcome, but it is, of course, yet another change for families, isn't it?
It certainly is. And I mean, how many of us have been just sort of longing for the time where some of those things that we used to do, we can start doing again, like visiting friends and going to a concert or movies or watching a sporting event, and that to be in this stage of transition where things are starting to change is really requiring us all to make some further adjustments and adaptations really to how we're going to tackle it.
Now, it is important to keep the connection going, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. We are social beings. It's part of our very essence, and the more we're socially connected to others, the better. To be in a situation of physical distancing does not mean we should be socially distant from each other or in isolation. And we need to kind of blend some ways together of remaining in contact that will enable us to keep and in some ways build our social connections even further, and our whole sense of personal well-being, our health, our mental health is very much influenced by our social connections.
My husband works away from home in WA at the moment, so he works FIFO, and he's been away since the middle of March, and we haven't seen him in person since then. We've got 3 young children under 6 years of age, so we've got 1 at school and 2 at home. And then, I've pretty much been doing the rest of it by myself. Some of the neighbours have been able to help me out a little bit, which has been lovely, but I don't have close family around, unfortunately. So it does provide a bit of a challenge there.
Hello, Daddy!
Every morning the kids will phone Dad through FaceTime to say good morning and how are you.
I miss you.
Oh, I miss you too, Robbie.
And they'll do their love yous, miss yous and that sort of thing. They also have their daddy doll that helps them stay connected as well. So they've got a little teddy that they can cuddle and talk to whenever they're feeling that yearning for him as well. I miss Daddy too.
A lot of us are missing being able to physically touch other people, not being able to shake people's hands or give your friends a hug. Is it really important as parents to shower our children with a lot of extra physical affection right now?
No, I don't think so. I think it's important to be normal. It means that children always need physical affection and attention and positive encouragement for the things they're doing. I don't think it requires us as parents to go over the top, to do things as though they're extra specially deserving of this kind of extra attention right now. I think probably what is important though is that we have to be attuned to when children want to speak to us.
Hey, Mummy!
Yeah, is it a bit stuck, is it? Okay.
Psychologically, to be in the moment with the kids so we understand what they're going through.
One of your number one tips during our shows has been to be extra kind during this time. How do we ensure that that continues within our families?
Well, we have to value it as an outcome. I mean, if you think about the importance of just being kind and respectful towards others, and to treat others in a way that we would like to be treated ourselves. Unless we value that as an outcome, we're not going to pursue it. We're not going to embed it in our parenting.
That's a girl. Good job.
But it's very important for children growing up that if you would like them to be, to show some gratitude to things that are happening in their social world, and to be able to be kind and generous at times to others. Those skills need to be modelled and demonstrated for children so they understand what they look like.
Well, coming up, we'll have more on how we can maintain those great habits of connection many of us have adopted throughout COVID-19. Welcome back. Well, Matt, being social means different things to different people, and during lockdown I saw a funny social media post that was telling introverts to check on their extroverted friends.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think it's just a recognition of individual differences that exist within people in terms of how sociable they are and how much social contact they need with others. There are a lot of people who actually enjoy their own company and during this period have been quite happy to just have one or two contacts that have enabled them to remain socially connected, whereas there are others who almost need daily contact with others in order to promote their own well-being and to feel good about themselves.
But are you missing us?
Yes, darling, I am missing you.
So I think the important thing is that when you think about the whole idea of reaching out and connecting, that there is a fundamental issue here, and that is that the more cut off, the more socially isolated we are, the greater risk we are that we can become lonely and that we develop significant mental health problems, including being at greater risk for suicide. So I think there's a kind of like an obligation on us to think about everyone in our social world and just ask the question about how can we be connecting and maintaining some contact, particularly with those who perhaps have not as good a social network as others may have.
So how's things going for you over there?
Yeah, all right.
I find it's a good way to help me feel sane throughout this. That connection is really important because as humans we need to be social beings, you know, we need to have these conversations with people in our own kind of age bracket. And using the online platforms to connect with your friends means you don't have to pack up the kids in the car and worry about who's got a shoe on and who's got matching clothes and, you know, if they've got pants on that day. You know, you can do those sorts of things at home and it's a little bit less stressful.
Over this last little while, I think there are many, many people who've discovered the power of social media and are learning ways of communicating with others that they never saw themselves as being part of. And it'll be interesting just to kind of see as we go forward how much of these new ways of connecting socially with others we maintain.
I certainly wish I had bought Zoom shares at the start of the year,
Yes,
don't you?
yeah.
Now, when we were talking about all of those creative ways that we maintained connection, do you think we can continue some of them? And what's the importance of doing that for children?
I think it is extremely valuable for a family to know that there are different ways that they can connect, for example, around kids' birthday parties. I was at a child's birthday party last night and there was no one there other than the immediate family, but the youngster was listening to messages from about a dozen people in her social world who all had great messages that they had passed on through their phones, and we would never have considered that previously as a way of sharing a birthday. And I think going forward, people will be more comfortable and more confident in their use of technology, and I would not be surprised if we see a massive increase in the different ways people can use these as forms of social connection.
Well, it's not just individuals who are keeping the ties of connection strong. Many community initiatives have sprung up to help people stay in touch during our days of separation. Joining us now is Matthew Cox, who is the director of Logan Together. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, Katrina. Hi, Matt.
Now, Matthew, your organisation based in the city of Logan is a really great example of what's achievable when communities come together.
Well, it's an extraordinary place, Logan, and like the rest of the world, we've suddenly found out just how important community is, not only in responding to really big challenges like the pandemic, but if you ask most families and what's most important to their overall sense of well-being, almost always top of the list is families and friends, that support relationship, those interactions we have with other people. That's particularly important when things are going wrong, like a pandemic, but it's always important. So we're really seeing that, and our community is an incredibly connected one. So we've just seen this incredible outpouring of community initiatives, big and small, that have come together to bust those barriers to isolation that we're all now facing.
One of the big success stories, Matthew, is your Mums and Bubs Facebook page. Tell us how many followers you're up to there.
It's now got something like somewhere between 22 and 25,000 members, predominantly local women who share their experience of being a mum, the challenges, the ups, the downs, the goods, the bads. And that's quite an extraordinary community to be part of. And it's really come into its own at this time. There's also some things that the community is doing through a new online information exchange or an information portal called strongertogetherlogan.com. And people are now sharing all sorts of content and all sorts of valuable resources, many of which they're creating themselves. So we've got local footy coaches doing footy coaching training you can do in your backyard. My personal favourite is a Pacific dancing class. Try that one, Matt, when you've got nothing else to do. Just fantastic local resources. There's story times. There's local people reading stories to their own kids and sharing that. There's children's authors getting online and reading their very well-known works.
I just sniff and snuff about.
And do you think this sense of connectedness will continue?
Well, I think we've just been reminded just how important it is. So absolutely. What we have found, though, is there are some digital divide issues in our community, as I'm sure there are around Australia. Not everybody has computers at home. Not everyone has internet access. So we've been working with some local partners, a fantastic local e-waste recycler called Substation 33. So they've done an extraordinary job getting hundreds of units donated, firstly. So people have rummaged around in their bottom drawers and pulled out their old laptops or their old desktops and dropped them in. They've then got people who are out of work to come in, they've given them some training to refit and re-kit those old machines, and then got them out into people's homes, particularly for older people who may not have had a lot of technology in their house. If they're self-isolating for all those good health reasons, they really needed some window onto the world.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of those great innovations and solutions with us, Matthew.
It's a pleasure.
Well, up next, we're going to talk about helping kids safely reconnect with friends they might not have seen in a while.
Hey Charlie,
Thanks so much for being with us today on Parenting in a Pandemic. Now, Matt, our kids have been through so much during this crisis, including being physically separated for a long time from friends of their own age, but also from extended family. Now, these restrictions have loosened somewhat. Matt, how can parents help with that transition?
One of the issues for me here is that when you're trying to use technology to enable children to socially connect with, say, grandparents or extended family, I think it is just worth that little bit of extra effort to set it up so you've got good sound and vision. I mean, the number of us who've seen these video calls where the camera is going all over the place, you can't even see who's in the room, the kids are running around, there's noise and screaming and so on. That's not a good environment for being with someone and sharing. So I think sometimes one or two little ground rules about if we're having a Zoom call or a video conference meeting with others, basically sitting at the table and to participate properly in terms of not running around and not misbehaving in that situation.
And how are you? Hammy, you good, darling?
If you get that right, then the person at the other end is able to hear what the kids have to say, show their interest in what the children are saying, and it becomes a nice exchange. If you don't deal with it, it falls apart really rapidly. And then, the kids don't want to speak to the grandparents don't want to participate in the Zoom call because it is a mess.
You sound like you're speaking from experience here, Matt.
Been there, done that.
Now, re-establishing family ties, of course, is one thing, but how do we manage kids who are reconnecting with their friends at school or at play with that social distancing that we still have to encourage?
Pack your bags.
It's an interesting one, this, isn't it? Because so many kids have been longing to get back to school with their friends. And so for the majority of kids, it's something that they're looking forward to doing, but they're also starting to realise that there's a loss associated with doing this, and that means there's less time with mum and dad. They've probably never had more time in recent times anyway, to be with mum and dad in such a close kind of situation. So for children who are a little bit anxious, they can feel a bit of separation anxiety. That's not just about going to school and mixing with friends again, but it's also having to say goodbye to mum and dad in a way that they perhaps felt when they first started school.
So my daughter is a bit more of an introvert, and I know for her, she's a bit anxious about reconnecting with the pecking order of those social groups back at high school. How do I prepare her for that? What sort of conversations can I have with her?
I think it's important to just clarify what it is that she's actually concerned about, because what you've mentioned is a whole bunch of things. I mean, and part of them relate to her role in the group and whether she feels included and whether things are changed relating to the friendship patterns that existed prior to, you know, going into lockdown and that kind of thing. So a discussion with teenagers about what it is that they're actually concerned about is often a very good idea. The other thing, though, is that to remember that when children are having to return to school after a break, there's often some anticipatory anxiety about what's going to happen, and many of the things that they worry about actually don't occur. And so after that first day or two, those anxieties that were so pressing the night before have now faded into being much less of an issue for the kid. And I think the important thing is just creating a positive expectation that, yeah, sure, they may be feeling a little bit apprehensive about this, but you can get through it. And it's conveying to your kids your confidence in their capacity to address the issue that's in front of them. You're not going to solve it, but you're confident that they can deal with it. And if there's ever been a message that's worth conveying to kids, is one of belief in them and their capacity to address issues that are important.
Well, coming up, how to reach out to those who find it hard to connect. Welcome back. Well, even in the 21st century, as we've heard, not everyone has access to technology. And during this time, it's made many of us in the community feel even more deeply isolated and separated from loved ones during this crisis. How can we get that back on track again and continue to reach out to people affected?
We really have to build our community spirit of reaching out to those that we can identify in our neighbourhoods, in our streets, who perhaps are on their own, are not well connected through technology to family, and reach out to them. And this includes doing things like just going down to the neighbour who you can see that their front hedge has not been trimmed for ages, and offering to do it for them.
Oh, Hamish, that's looking great. Thanks so much.
That's no problem, Sandra. You're welcome.
It's a gesture of kindness, and if you take children along in that situation, what they're witnessing is adults showing kindness towards another person in their local neighbourhood, and which makes it absolutely legitimate, appropriate for them to do and think about similar things. I think right now, reaching out and supporting each other, particularly those who are more vulnerable and at risk of developing serious problems as a result of lack of connection and loneliness, is a very, very good thing to be doing.
We as parents often try to tell our kids about the importance of things like kindness and gratitude. How much more is it likely to stick if we show rather than tell?
Oh, look, it's much more likely to stick. Actions speak so much more loudly than words in this situation. If children see you enacting those as skills and strategies, they're much more likely to see them as being authentic and to believe them.
So summing up, Matt, what would your key messages be to stay socially connected in a world where our usual ways of being together are continuing to evolve?
Look, I think it's important that we just remind ourselves of the importance of doing what we can to stay socially connected. Being physically distant from each other does not mean social isolation, and it does not and should not mean that we're not connecting with people. So we need to reach out. So it's also helping our kids stay connected as well. It's so important for us to think of clever and creative ways for children to remain in contact with family and friends, and I think everyone benefits from that. The other thing that I just mention here is that to think about those in our community who are isolated and for whom others reaching out to them may mean a huge difference to their sense of well-being and just being a valued human being. And finally, I'll just say that as we do get to meet up again in person, that we just have to be mindful of all of the rules relating to physical distancing and hand hygiene. We do not want to go back to where we were again, just as we're coming out of the situation of being socially isolated for so long.
As always, very helpful advice, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katrina.
Well, next time on Parenting in a Pandemic, shared parenting between households and how to ensure our kids stay happy and safe. As always, remember to go online for any resources related to the topics we've been exploring today, and we'll see you on Thursday for more great guidance from Professor Matt Sanders. Until then, stay safe and stay well.